Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be doing a eyeshadow palette collection video. So I'm just going to go through the palettes that I do own and talk a little bit about them, tell you which ones are my favorites, and just show you what palettes I do have. I'm going to start on this side of my vanity. So I have a bunch of palettes on this side. I'm actually going to start off with one of my most used palettes, which you can tell when you look at it. It is the Modern Renaissance palette from ABH. I have used this palette so much. As you can see, I have hit pan in 3 of the shades, and I am about to hit pan in about 3 more of the shades. I love this palette. When this palette came out, I got it the day it released, and I got it because I love these like burgundy-ish, red, deep, almost pink shades. I love the browns. I love these two over here as transition shades. I also love using these if I'm doing a basic look and I just want to like prime my eyes and just pat a shade on my eye and just wear it like that. Love that. I love this orange, almost burnt orange shade right here. Love this shade. I use this palette so much. I'm actually about to go ahead and buy another one because I have hit pan in this one. This is definitely one of my favorite palettes ever. The next one is also another Anastasia palette. This is the Prism palette. I love this palette. This palette is definitely more bold and more daring than the Modern Renaissance palette. As you can see, it has that bright neon lime yellowish shade. It has this beautiful purple shade here, this amazing green shade, this beautiful shade. Then it has like the mattes, and there's this beautiful like bluish colored shade, which I love. I'm actually gonna swatch you my favorite shades out of this palette, which is Dimension, Throne, Osiris, and Eternal. So these are the shimmer shades. These are some of my favorite shimmer shades out of this palette. I use these all the time around the holidays. When I first got this, it's a very festive palette. I love it. I love the shimmers in it. The mattes are very creamy. The shimmers are beautiful. Actually, I'm going to swatch them on my hand just so you can see how they actually apply. So that's how they actually apply when I do a finger swatch. I love the shimmer shades. I feel like you can create so many different looks with this palette, just like the Modern Renaissance. It is a palette you can definitely work with. It is definitely more of a bold palette than the Modern Renaissance is, but I absolutely love it. The brush that it comes with, which actually just fell out of the palette here. Here you go. It comes with the dual-sided brush, which a lot of palettes I do not care for their brushes, but the Anastasia palettes, I actually love the brushes that they come with. Next palette is actually a palette that has had a lot of controversy. It is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Subculture palette. I love this palette. It is definitely a different formula to work with. Like, it's definitely not the same formula as the Prism, as the Modern Renaissance palette. Definitely a different formula, but once you learn how to use this palette, it is beautiful. This yellow shade here, this shade here, this green, almost olive green shade with almost a gray kind of undertone. Beautiful shades. I love this palette. It is more of a pressed pigments palette, so you do not use it in the same way as you would like the Modern Renaissance or the Prism palette, but it is beautiful when you learn how to use it. So I love this palette. The next palette is actually another Anastasia Beverly Hills palette. This is the Soft Glam palette. When this came out, there was a bunch of controversy because it does have a few shades that the Modern Renaissance palette actually has. I'm actually going to hold up my Modern Renaissance with this palette. So as you can see, okay, a couple of these shades are the same, but the shades in this palette that are the same are some of my favorite shades in the Modern Renaissance palette. This palette is a beautiful palette for springtime looks, for summer looks, for wedding looks. The shimmers in this palette are just gorgeous. Sultry and bronze are like the most buttery formula of shimmers. I love these two colors. They are so pretty, so reflective. You don't even need concealer or any spray to make those very bold. I absolutely love that palette. Now I'm gonna pull out a couple more palettes. Sorry, I'm not doing these in any particular order. I'm just literally going through all my palettes. But this one is the Tartist Pro palette from Tarte. I love this palette. I love using this palette to make smoky eye looks. I love the mattes in this palette. I have not really dipped into the shimmers, but the mattes in this palette are amazing. I use this when I do want to create a very smoky eye look. It has all the colors I would use for a smoky eye. And a lot of people do have a lot of things to say about Tarte in general because a lot of their palettes are almost the same. They're that same warm tone brown look with reds and tans. So I do love Tarte. I do love their brand. Their formula is amazing. I would like to see them branch out into some more brightly colored palettes and not repeat the same palettes, but I do definitely love their formula. I love the palettes of Tarte that I do have. Next palette is the Tartelette Toasted palette by Tarte. This again, it's a very brown and tan palette. This palette is beautiful for just a very natural look. If I'm trying to go with a natural look, I'm going to use this palette. Very pretty, very natural. It has the browns, it has the tans, it also has a couple shimmers, and it is a very cute palette. I love this palette. Next palette is also another Tarte palette. This is the Tarte Man Eater palette. I actually got this on sale from Nordstrom Rack, I believe. It was either Nordstrom Rack or Macy's. I'm actually not 100% sure. I love this palette. This is a palette that I would take if I was going on vacation and I wanted a small palette to create a smoky eye with, because it has the black, it has the deep browns, it has the lighter browns, the cream colors, the white. It has all those colors. So if I wanted something smaller and I was going to go on a trip and I wanted something that was smaller than the Tartist Pro palette, I would take the Man Eater palette definitely, because it has the same formula as the Tartist Pro and the colors are very similar in this palette. Next palette is a new one that I just recently got. My boyfriend actually bought this for me. It is the Fenty Beauty Moroccan Spice palette. I actually did not know what to think about this when I first got it, but once I used it, I love this palette. These blues, the blue over here, beautiful. This color here, I don't know. There, I'm gonna bring you in a little closer so you can see the colors. This is a beautiful palette. In this palette, she did bring the mattes and also the shimmers, the almost topper-like shades, and these shimmers over here. So she did really come to slay with this palette. Her first palette was all shimmer shades, which made the Galaxy palette really hard to use. This palette has the shimmers, it has the mattes, it has colors that are everyday, it has the bright colors. The shimmers are very creamy. I say this palette is amazing. I feel like Rihanna definitely made a good decision when creating this palette. I love this palette. Okay, I'm actually gonna grab this palette. I love the packaging on this palette. I am not gonna lie, I bought this palette literally for the packaging. I saw it at Sephora and I loved it. It is the House of Lashes Sephora collection eyeshadow palette. It is a beautiful palette as well. I actually have not dipped into this palette yet. I need to use it, but I bought it because the packaging is just so gorgeous and these colors are beautiful. I love these colors. The blues, gorgeous blues. That silver, beautiful. It has the natural tones. It has this beautiful navy shade, which I don't have any navy shades, so I actually do need to dip into this and see how the formula on these works, because I actually have never used this palette, but I did buy it because it is just a beautiful looking palette, and it was on sale when I got it from my Sephora, which is a JCPenney Sephora. So I love this palette. It's beautiful. I'm actually going to leave this out on my vanity because I do need to dip into this and try using it. Next palette is a holiday collection set. It's from Too Faced. It is the Best Year Ever 2018 set. I actually picked this up from TJ Maxx. I had seen it when it was coming out and I thought it looked interesting, but I actually did not pick it up when it first came out. I waited until it was actually at TJ Maxx. So it comes in this little makeup clutch. And when you open it up, it has a little booklet. It has the palettes, and then it has a Better Than Sex mascara up here. So the first palette is called the Natural Beauty palette. So it's a really cute blue, and when you open it up, it has the natural shades and a bronzer. This bronzer is too light for me, but these shades are definitely very beautiful. This is a very natural palette. Next palette, I guess, is more like a going out palette. It's called the Super Fun Night palette. It's black. It has champagne glasses and champagne on it. And when you open it, it has a little deeper, it's still very natural looks, but a lot deeper than the first palette. And it comes with this highlighter shade. Next palette is called I Believe in Pink. So it's a pink one with pink hearts, very cute packaging, and it has a very pretty blush. I've actually used this blush and love the blush. And then it has very natural tan colors as well for the eyeshadows. So I got this for $24 at TJ Maxx. I am not 100% sure how much it costed when it first came out in stores, but it is a very cute collection. Next few palettes are actually some palettes that have recently had some controversy in this past week. These palettes have been not newer palettes, but this is a newer brand, and this brand has actually been accused of stealing ideas from a smaller indie brand. I got these palettes before all of that drama, before all of the accusations came out, and before even the product that she has been accused of copying the idea from did come out. These are the Huda Beauty palettes. This is the Desert Dusk palette. This palette is a very beautiful palette. I do not use this palette that much, but it is definitely a very beautiful palette. And if you can tell, I have dipped into this glitter quite a bit. This is an actual glitter shadow. It's not like a shimmer. It's a literal loose glitter. What is it called? Let me see what it's called. It says 8 buttery mattes, 6 pressed shadows, 3 toppers, and 1 daring glitter. It's a very beautiful glitter shade. I love using this. This is a very beautiful palette. And while I do not support her most recent release of the baking powder, which she did steal from the Beauty Bakery's idea or whatever, I do not support that, but I'm not gonna lie, her palettes are amazing. This palette is the Huda Beauty Textured Eyeshadow Palette, the Rose Gold Edition. This is her first Rose Gold palette. This is not the remastered. I got this when this palette came out, and this palette was all hyped. She was saying it's amazing. She's saying you need to get it. It's limited edition. She's saying it is the best formula we could create. She was saying how happy she was about the palette. It is a beautiful palette, as you can see. These shimmers are definitely gorgeous. But when you go to use the palette, the formula of the shimmers is very hard to use. You cannot use a brush with these. You do have to use your fingers, which I am okay with using to a certain extent, but when you are selling a $65 palette and saying how amazing the palette is, saying how people need to get it, how it's limited edition, and how it's the best formula you could create, I expect something very amazing. And when she said it was limited edition, obviously I wanted to run out and get it, because if it was that limited edition, if it was that amazing, I definitely wanted it in my collection. So I was very disappointed when just a couple months later, it comes out that she was remastering it. So I did not get the remastered one. I still have this one. I don't use it that much just because of how hard the shimmers are to work with. And I do not support the whole remastering of a palette that was supposedly amazing, that was supposedly the best palette that she could create. The next palettes I do have is the mini Huda Beauty palettes. This is the Mauve Obsessions palette. I love these palettes. They are $27 at Sephora, and they do have the 9 shades. They are definitely amazing formula. These shimmers in here, definitely amazing. I love these palettes. If I go on vacation, I will probably be taking a couple of these Obsessions palettes just because they are so easy to work with and such a good size. Like if you see they're like super small, but the formula is still there. I also have the Smoky Obsessions, which is more for a smoky eye. It has the black, it has a silver shimmer, it has a gold shimmer, it has some brown, some tans. Beautiful palette, $27 as well. Definitely worth it. Definitely love these little palettes just because they are so handy. They are so amazing for the price. This one is the Warm Brown Obsessions palette. Again, amazing formula, beautiful colors, the shimmer is amazing, the mattes are very creamy and easy to blend. I also have the Electric Obsessions palette. Love this palette. I love this blue shimmer shade here. This blue shimmer shade is amazing. I love the yellow. I love this almost teal, not teal, like it's a green blue color. Beautiful. You can make amazing looks with this palette. Love this little palette. Again, I do not support Huda Beauty's most recent actions, but I do love those palettes. I'm gonna go ahead and grab a couple more palettes. This is the Becca palette. It's the Becca, what is it called? Eye Lights Après-Ski Glow Collection palette. This is a beautiful palette, okay? It's very reflective. Let me see if I can get that focus in there. It's a very beautiful palette. It is all shimmer shades with a highlighter in the middle. I do love this palette. I actually do not use this palette on my eyes as much as I do use it as a highlight palette. I will use all these shades on my cheeks. I think they're beautiful as blush toppers, as highlights, as inner corner highlights, as brow highlights. I love that palette as a highlighter palette more than I do as a eyeshadow palette. Next palette I have is the Pure Gold Digger palette. You can't really see because it's a very reflective palette, but see on the back it says Pure Gold Digger palette. This is a very pretty palette. I actually got this palette at Kohl's in the sale section. So it has like a bronzer, it has a blush, a highlight, and then these here are eyeshadows. I love the bronzer in this palette. Most of the time when I get a face palette like this, the bronzer will not be deep enough for my skin tone. This palette, the bronzer is deep enough for my skin tone and it is very creamy. It looks very good on my face. I love that palette. This next palette is the Natasha Denona Mini Sunset palette. I actually had been thinking about getting Natasha Denona palettes for a while before this came out because I've heard that her palettes are amazing. I have heard very good things about them. So when this came out, I was very psyched to get it because this is only $25 and normally her palettes are upwards of $100. I think her most expensive palette's like $230. I think her Sunset palette was like $129. Don't quote me on those prices, but they were in that range. This palette is amazing. I love the formula on this palette. And I have heard from other people that the formula on this palette is different than her other palette, so I'm actually not sure about that. I have no idea because I have not tried any of her larger palettes, but I have to say the formula on that for $25 for 5 shades is amazing. And I usually do not hit pan on most of my shadow palettes, so this, even though it is very small, as you can see, that's compared to my hand, that's how small the palette is. Even though it is very small, I feel like the shades are beautiful. I feel like it is a very good price for what you do get, and I love it. Next palette is a more expensive palette. This is the Pat McGrath Mothership Sublime Bronze Ambition Eye Palette. I love the packaging on this palette. It is the prettiest packaging on any eyeshadow palette I've ever had. This was actually my first purchase from Pat McGrath. So it opens like this. And it has like the little sheet inside with the shade names. And then here are the colors. This palette is beautiful. I love it. I love her formula. I love her palette. This is a $55 palette for 6 shades. Very expensive. I had been wanting to get one of her palettes for a while before these came out, but her bigger palettes are $125, and I do not technically usually spend that much on an eyeshadow palette. So when this came out, I was psyched to get it. I love this palette. I love making bronzy, like glowy looks with this palette. It is a gorgeous palette. I love it. She also came out with, I think it was 3 other palettes when this one came out. She came out with one that was more of a purpley pink palette, and then I think another one that was more of a darker smoky eye palette, if I'm thinking of the correct palettes. I'm actually not sure about that. I'm pretty sure that she came out with 3 other palettes when that came out, but I got the bronze one just because I am very into the bronze look. As you can see today, I'm going to zoom you in. I have a very bronzy eye look, bronze, browns, and gold eye look on today. So bronzes are, like a bronzy eye look is definitely my go-to look. So that palette is one that I love. I'm gonna pull out a couple more palettes here. Here is the Morphe 9B palette. This is what this one looks like. It's just a very basic naturals palette with some shimmers and some mattes. This is one of the ones that does come with the mirror. And I got this at Sephora. I believe this was a $12 palette, if I'm thinking of the correct price. I believe that was $12. I love Morphe palettes. I find that they are very affordable and that for the price, they're a very good quality. Are they as good quality as some other high-end brands? I'm not going to say yes, I'm not going to say no, because I feel like every Morphe palette I get has a different formula. I don't know whether that's true or it just seems like they have a different formula. This one is the Morphe 25B palette. I got this at Ulta, and I actually really like this palette. I know a lot of people complain about the fact that a lot of Morphe palettes seem to have all the same brown shades or all the same neutral shades. I love this palette. I pull this palette out when I need a good transition shade. It has transition shade for every skin tone in one palette, which is really nice. So I love this palette. I love these browns. I love these shimmers here in the middle. I find that Morphe palettes, yes, they do have a lot of browns. Yes, they do have a lot of similar shades, but I enjoy them. I enjoy my Morphe palettes. This next one is the Morphe 3502 palette. It's a very beautiful palette. I love the oranges, the reds, this orange shade right here, these 2 right here, 2 of my favorite shades in the palette. Actually, these 3 right here are probably the shades that made me want to get this palette. I love this palette. It is a very pretty palette. And I love doing like more smoked out orange and red looks with that palette. It's very easy to blend. The shimmers work amazing. The mattes are very creamy. I love that palette. This palette is the 35F palette. So this is a mainly shimmer palette. I actually got this as a gift. This palette's mainly shimmers except for this row right here, which are mattes. So you have everything you need for your transition colors, and then you have all of these beautiful shimmer colors. As you can see, they're very creamy, very buttery. I love this palette. I actually don't use it as much as I should. It's probably another palette that I need to leave out on my vanity, so I do start using it more. But it's a very beautiful palette. The last Morphe palette I do have is one that is very epic. It is the Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette. I love this palette. I love these shades right here. These 4 shades are beautiful. I love this yellow shade up here, this mustard yellow. This palette is a very gorgeous palette. I feel like she came out with the most amazing formula and the most amazing combination of colors when she created this palette. I did not get this palette on the first go. I got it when it came back out and it had all the colors listed on the back. So I love this palette. It is one that I do pull out from time to time. I have so many palettes. I actually don't use all my palettes that much, but this is one that I would say is definitely a staple in my collection. It is a little more expensive than some of the other Morphe palettes, but since it is a influencer product, since it is one that she took her own time to formulate a new formula for, it is her brand palette. Basically, it's her favorite shadows. It is definitely a palette that she worked very hard on. I did not mind paying $38 for that palette. My next palette is a little Makeup Forever palette. This is the Palette 9 Artist Shadow palette. It is very pretty. It has some very pretty bright colors. That blue, very pretty. This pink and this purple, very pretty. I actually bought this around Halloween because I was doing a Harley Quinn look and I really wanted that blue. So that's the color I actually bought it for. It's a very beautiful palette. It was on sale at Sephora when I did buy it. These are all, I don't know what I call them. They're not really matte. They're more, these here are definitely like shimmer shades. This pink is a very creamy shade with like some glitter particles in it, but it doesn't really apply like a shimmer, but it is a very beautiful palette. I love this palette for that blue and the pink. Next palette I actually have is another Makeup Forever palette. It came in this little tin. It's called the Artistic palette. I got this at TJ Maxx, so it's a very, very pretty palette. I actually have not dipped into this palette yet. I just got it recently, but it is very gorgeous. And when I saw it at TJ Maxx, I could not resist picking it up. The tin that it goes in is just the cutest little component. Let's see. Next palette. I'm just gonna pull out this whole thing right here. Next palette I am gonna show you is a Too Faced palette. This is the Too Faced Chocolate Gold palette. This is a very pretty palette. It does have a lot of shimmers, and when this came out, I know people were saying, okay, that's a lot of shimmers for one palette. Why aren't there more mattes? Well, these mattes over here, these are mattes, are really good mattes over here for transition and for setting your eye. You can see those. But the shimmers on this palette are just amazing. I love these shimmer shades. I love this pink. I love this green shade here. This gold is stunning. I love this palette. And to make it even better, it smells like chocolate. So that is definitely a beautiful, beautiful palette. Another Too Faced palette that I love is the Too Faced Sweet Peach palette. My boyfriend actually bought this for me back when it first came out. And as you can see, I definitely went in on some of these shades. I love this palette. It is beautiful. This shade here, love that shade. Love that shade. The shimmers in this, beautiful shimmers. And again, it smells like peaches. And I absolutely love this palette. Another palette that is in this holder is the KKW Mario palette. I love KKW. I love Kim Kardashian West. She is a beautiful person, beautiful lady. I love her, and I love her makeup brand. I love the minimalistic packaging. I know a lot of people say like, oh, why does her packaging look so cheap? I'm like, I don't think it looks cheap. I think it's just very basic, very beautiful. This palette is gorgeous. That blue shade right there, beautiful. I love this palette. I love the fact that I can make just like a basic bronzy eye, and then I can just like pop a little bit of blue underneath the lid, underneath the eye. Or I can do a full-on blue lid with some shimmers, with some mattes. Just beautiful, beautiful palette. Love it. Next, I did get the Patrick Starr matte palette. This is the Gold Getter palette. I love this palette. That shimmer is beautiful. I love this matte shade here. Got this palette mainly because I do love Patrick Starr. I do not usually get MAC products just because they do test on animals. So I usually do not get MAC eyeshadow palettes, but I love Patrick Starr, so I wanted to show my support and get at least one of his palettes. Next little palette I actually have not really used this palette, but it is very beautiful. It is the Smashbox Valletta Collection palette. It is a very pretty palette. It comes with mainly shimmer shades. I got this when the collection first came out. I love Valletta. I love her collection. It is the prettiest packaging. It's this rose gold. It has the lips with the rose on them. It's a very reflective packaging. I just love how this palette looks. I actually have not dipped into it yet. I need to use that palette. I have so many palettes that I actually need to try and use pretty soon. And my next palettes I'm going to pull out are these Juvia's Place palettes. This is the Zulu. I love Juvia's Place. Their palettes are so inexpensive, but the quality on these palettes are amazing. I actually heard about them when I was watching a Nikki Tutorials video, and she is always talking about how beautiful Juvia's Place palettes are, so I did have to go ahead and try those. I love these palettes. This one is the Festival palette. This palette, the packaging is just gorgeous, and then when you open it, these colors are just beautiful. I love this palette. This is this red shade and this orange, so pigmented. The shadows, for the price that they are, the shadows are so pigmented, so beautiful. I don't think they could do better for the price that they sell those palettes for. Next palettes are some of my favorite ever palettes. These are the Jeffree Star. This is the Jeffree Star Androgyny palette. This is one of my favorite palettes ever. This palette is gorgeous. As you can see, I did drop it and break that shade, which was really sad for me, but I love this palette. The mattes are so pigmented, so creamy. The shimmers are like butter. This palette, if you get one palette, I would say get this Androgyny palette. This palette is perfect. He could not have done better. This palette is the best palette ever. Next palette I'm going to pull out is the Jeffree Star Thirsty palette. This is from his 2018 summer collection. It looks like a creamsicle. It is beautiful, and when you open it, it screams summer. It is just gorgeous. These shades are so pigmented. The color goes on beautiful. That yellow shows up so beautiful on my skin. This shade right here, this is shade Bitch. This is Kumquat. I love these two shades here. I love all of these shimmer glitter metallic shades. Those are actually a really new formula for his brand that he just made for this palette. These are just gorgeous on the eye. As you can see, I do have those shimmers on my eyes today. I'm going to zoom you in so you can see those. So that is the shimmers that I have on my eye today are from the Thirsty palette, the shimmer and the glitter shades. They're very gorgeous. You can use a brush with them. You can use your finger to tap them on. They're just the prettiest shades ever. I love this palette. Next palette is a palette that I adore as well. It is the Blood Sugar palette. This palette comes in the cutest packaging. It is like a little med box. It has the clasps to open. Then it's a faux leather box, if you can see the detail on that. And then when you open it, has a big mirror, which I'm not going to show you because it will blind you because I do have lights on me today. And this palette has the most beautiful shades. It has this beautiful purple, this pink, beautiful gray shade, gold shade, these transition shades here, and then all of these reds here, this purple, this deep, almost purpley brown color. This palette is just gorgeous. And as you can see, most of the shades do have his Starr logo, and then this one here actually has the medical symbol on it, and this one over here has a like injection or shot pressed into that. This palette, I adore this palette. This palette is probably one of his best palettes to date. It is the prettiest palette ever. And even better, all of his palettes are vegan, they're cruelty free. They are just amazing. Next palette, and actually the last palette I will be talking about today. Actually, no, I lied. I have more palettes. I have a whole stack of them on my floor. I did not see. I'm sorry about that. But this palette is the Beauty Killer palette. This was Jeffree Star's first palette that he ever released. The Beauty Killer. I love this palette for my bright colors. This pink is so pigmented, so beautiful. This blue, gorgeous. It has that pretty shimmer in it. This purple has a beautiful shimmer to it. This gold is just blinding. When you put this gold on, it is the most blinding color ever. And this black shade, I love using this black shade to do a smoky eye, because if you can see, if my camera picks it up, it has beautiful gold. It's like a matte shade with beautiful gold flecks of glitter. So when you put it on the eye, it goes on like a matte shade, but it has beautiful gold reflects of glitter. I love this palette. This is a beautiful palette. Next palettes I have are a couple. This is the BH Cosmetics Weekend Festival palette. I picked this up at Ulta after seeing Raw Beauty Christie's review of this palette. She made a beautiful, beautiful look of this palette with this palette, and so when I saw that, I had to go and pick it up. For $18, the quality of this palette is absolutely amazing. I completely suggest that you try out some BH Cosmetics products. Their products are amazing. Their eyeshadow formula is amazing for the price that you do pay for it. Next palette I got as a gift. It is the Violet Voss Like a Boss palette. This palette is beautiful. These shimmer shades are just to die for. This shimmer right here and this shimmer and this gold shimmer are just gorgeous. I love this palette. Next palette is actually a palette that I do not use much, but it is a very gorgeous palette. It is the Fenty Beauty Galaxy palette. I love the packaging. Look at that glitter on the packaging. It has this beautiful, beautiful, almost like holographic kind of packaging. It is a all glitter palette. This was Fenty Beauty's first eyeshadow palette. So if you can see, all of those shadows are shimmer shades. They are beautiful shimmer shades. They are beautiful to use as toppers, to use as inner corner highlights. They are simply gorgeous. It is just not a palette I grab as much because there is no matte shades in there. So if I do use this palette, I do have to pair it with another palette. So I do not end up pulling this palette out as much as I would like to. Next, I have a couple palettes from a brand that I actually do not support as an individual, but I have bought these palettes before I actually stopped supporting this brand, or they were gifted to me. So I do have the Kat Von D Saint and Sinner palette. This palette is gorgeous. Here, I'm gonna try to. When you open it, it looks like a cathedral window. It has the Saint side and the Sinner side. These shades are gorgeous. I love the formula of this palette. I will continue to use this palette just because I did spend my money on this palette. I'm not going to throw it out just because I don't agree with her beliefs now. I do not purchase her products from Sephora or from Ulta now, but I will be using the palettes that I do already have in my collection. And her formulas are amazing. Next palette is another Kat Von D palette. I was actually gifted this from my boyfriend. He bought me this for last month when it came out. It is her 10th anniversary palette. This palette is beautiful. It has beautiful artwork on it. And the shades here are amazing. This green shade is beautiful. It's like a shimmer shade. This gold is beautiful. I love the colors in this palette, and I will be using this because, as I said, I was gifted this palette from my boyfriend, and it is a beautiful palette. I have to go to my bedroom and get a couple more palettes, so just hold on and I will be back in just a moment.